All right, joining me now is a gentleman you might have seen just blow the grappling world away at ADCC 2022, but he is not done this year. He returns to action. This will be at at 1 on Prime Video 3 when he takes on a Sambo world champion, Uali Kurzev. It is the one and only Kade Ruotolo. Hi, Kade. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for that intro. That was epic. How are you?
Okay, talk me through ADCC 2022. It obviously went very well for you, and I'm sure you went in there expecting to win, but you got all the wins via submission. Looking back on the tournament, was that a best case scenario?
Guaranteed, guaranteed. I think, as I said before, I think the only way it could have gone any better was if I submitted them quicker, right? But yeah, 4 fights, 4 submissions, dream come true for sure.
Did you, in terms of the matchups, was there one you wanted more than the other ones? I mean, some big names you beat obviously were Lachlan Giles and then Mika Galvan. Were those, like, when you thought about who you wanted to go up against, were those the names?
And I didn't have any kind of personal, thing with anyone in the division as far as who I wanted to scrap or wanted to fight. I think every single person in that division was so talented. I knew every single person, could have beaten everyone on their best day. So I guess if I had to choose one, probably Mika, because he had gotten that last win over my brother, so I knew it probably would have felt pretty good to get that redemption over him.
What did your brother, because you guys corner each other, so what did your brother tell you about facing Mika that you were able to take into your match with him?
Right. I think one thing not a lot of people understand is how like physically strong Mika is. He's much stronger than a lot of the other competitors. Not as explosive, but he has like an isometric strength where he can just kind of pull you in and just like his grips they just feel extra sticky. So he gave me some great advice as far as that goes, and maybe not to just fight hands first, more legs first, the bigger limbs, and because I knew he wouldn't technically be able to get to my heel and heel hook me.
One of the interesting parts about this tournament was just how popular it was, right? Like there was at the Thomas and Mack Center, they had thousands of people in attendance. The production was big. So you tell me, as a competitor, what is the key to making jiu-jitsu a popular spectator sport?
For sure. It's a great question. I think we've had so many different rule sets, so many different athletes fighting around the rule sets and playing as safe as possible to get to the win, almost like a chess match, and I think especially with jiu-jitsu being a slower pace, we don't have strikes, we don't have kicks, there's not as much fast, high-paced action. As we really leave it up to the athletes to put on the show. So the athletes are kind of fighting around the rules, just trying to squeak out a win. It's not going to be the most exciting, but if the athlete's there looking for the kill from the start to the finish, looking for every little window, every opportunity to get the submission, that's where a lot of the scrambles and action is. So I think that's the more exciting route, or the more exciting side of jiu-jitsu. And I think it's just more up to the athletes and big platforms to inspire the athletes to put on performances like that.
I was going to say, like, what, reasonably speaking, can a promoter or, I don't know, an event organizer do to incentivize athletes to have that kind of mentality you're talking about?
Yeah, man, I don't want to be that guy and sound like that, but money always helps. You know what I mean? Money is definitely a big inspiration for a lot of people, especially in the jiu-jitsu world where there hasn't always been that much money into it, especially compared to other martial arts. It used to be where you train all year, you train as hard as you can, you book your flight from wherever you're living to the Long Beach Pyramid, you fight the world championships. Maybe you have 9 tough fights, you get to the finals, and then you win, you get the praise, you get the glory, but you're almost losing money. You're out the flight, the hotel, and whatever else it is. And I think so, and for a lot of people, the only way to make money in jiu-jitsu, at least in the past, was to, win that world championship, get your name out there, open up a gym, start teaching seminars, things like that. Now we're starting to see money come in from different federations, different platforms, and it's really growing the sport and putting money in athletes' pockets, which is really inspiring the athletes. The platforms aren't going to want to pay athletes that are putting on boring performances. They're not even going to want to bring you back, right? So I think just that concept in general is really pushing the pace, and that's how, at least I feel like that's what inspires me a lot.
It's kind of interesting. A guy like, for example, he's not like a top competitor anymore, but a guy like Keenan Cornelius has always been really interesting to me, right? Because in like years and years ago when I first started covering MMA, so let's say 2005-ish, right? Where I think you were 2 years old at the time. My word. But back then you could, to your point, right? You could get a name by winning a big event and then have a school or do seminars or something like that. But there's only so many guys that could do that. If you were of that Keenan level where he was obviously winning some pretty big tournaments, you then had to go into MMA if you wanted money. But he was like, I'm never going to do that. I'm just going to stay in jiu-jitsu and, spare my brain. I'm curious, like, how many people in jiu-jitsu could do that, where they could have opportunities before if they wanted to go to MMA, but now they could just stay in jiu-jitsu and make plenty of money and just stick with that?
I'd say more and more guys are kind of doing that route now, like you said, either, seminars, opening up a gym, or either, teaching seminars, opening up a gym, or, kind of maybe some DVDs, finding a way to make money. That's pretty much the only way possible. Sorry, I was just getting another message call there.
For a top athlete in jiu-jitsu, so we're not talking the average guy, but someone like you around that level, someone who like really competes and wins big tournaments, can you just do that and be financially stable in jiu-jitsu these days?
You'd have to be at the highest level, top 5, ranked top 5, and competing, consistently, even at the top levels where we're making super fast. I'll just put 2 names out there, just for example, like, I don't know, let's say Hanato Kanuto versus Nikki Ryan, right? We saw that at ADCC. Like, even a matchup like that probably isn't going to get much more than $15,000 into the match, as far as Bellath athletes getting paid something like that. I'd be surprised if it went much higher than that. So it's possible, but it's just you're not going to be making a very good living, right? And the guys at the very top, guys like Gordon, I think are getting paid a lot more. My professor, of course, gets paid a lot more. And yeah, there's definitely higher profile athletes that maybe do get a bit more money in their pockets, but it's definitely difficult, and you really have to be pretty much at the top of the peak to make money in jiu-jitsu without teaching seminars, gyms, things like that.
What about the sponsorship money? What's that like?
Right, man. That's I guess to everyone's different, right? Everyone has different supporters, and different supporters support everyone differently. But we've been so blessed with the same great sponsor since we've been 10 years old, I think. Since almost before I could remember, we've had Ruka Shoyuro, and they've been amazing supporting us and keeping us just financially stable enough where we can just keep our focus on jiu-jitsu, keep our focus on training, and not really have to worry about those things. But yeah, there's definitely great sponsors out there in jiu-jitsu, and they're helping a ton. And it's the sponsors and the brands that are really bringing the sport to new heights. And so I think the sponsors and the brands need to continue and giving more. I think there's federations. I'm never one to throw shade, right? But there's brands like like I said, the IBJJF. Where guys, they train all year, they have 9 tough fights, they get there, they win, and they're getting almost nothing in return. So a lot of the times it's almost counterproductive. I don't want to say counterproductive, but it's just at least from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, fair enough. A couple more questions about ACC, then I want to talk about your match coming up at 1 on Amazon Prime 3, or 1 on Prime Video, excuse me. First thing, did you have a favorite win? Of all the wins you had, there was 4 obviously via submission, the how you got the gold. Which one of those are you like, that was my favorite one?
It's a great question, man. I think as far as the one that just felt like just the biggest, it was probably the final, of course, the Mika one, when I finally did it. And knowing that it was a tough scrap, and Mika had gotten that last win over Ty, I was just like, I really wanted this one. I was really hungry for that one. But as far as looking back on the event, my favorite match probably have to be the PJ match, because it was just a very tight match. I fought out of it some pretty hectic positions, and then I scrambled to the arm bars, a pretty crazy finish. So I think that was maybe my favorite finish, but favorite match should probably, or best feeling after the match, maybe the Mika match for sure.
And something that comes up with the ADCC. Now, I want to put my cards on the table. It's about performance enhancing drugs. I know you and your brother pride yourselves on, not making that a part of your athletic regimen. As a consumer of the product, and I say this to you only from that perspective, it does not bother me. I don't have an issue with it, but I'd be curious about what your perspective is, because it did look like there was a fair amount of it going on in that tournament.
Absolutely. I'm all for it once you get to an age where you need it. You know what I mean? Once you're like doctor prescribed. If you're older, you're not really feeling the same, like by all means, that's your decision, go for it. I think it's, it starts getting unfair when you start seeing it, growing up in the kids divisions, even, leading into the adults divisions. I see it so often. And, these kids are starting earlier and earlier and earlier now. And, it used to be, I think that's one thing that a lot of the majority, the mainstream is just unaware of, is the amount of steroids, and not just jiu-jitsu, but every sport, especially jiu-jitsu, because we don't really have any testing, right? So with that being said, we've pretty much just had, the entire sport roided since I can, since I've been in it. You know what I mean? It's definitely kind of a trip. And it was something that I never knew growing up. I only started realizing this once we started competing at that level, and you start seeing it, and it's literally everybody, and it's crazy to me. I think there's only a handful of athletes that are clean out there. And I think, I have huge inspiration. Like the Diaz brothers are massive inspirations for me and my brother, because they kind of did what we're trying to do in jiu-jitsu, in a sense where, everyone knew they were clean in the sport, where it feels like, there's so many studs, so many kind of roid heads to say. And to do it clean and, compete at the highest levels for so long was just a huge inspiration. And I remember seeing, everybody's on steroids, or, that famous quote that they said. But that really hit home with us, because that's like literally the way we feel, So our entire games has been altered to fight around strength rather than to, kind of fight it head to head. And it's definitely an interesting dynamic. I hope there's some change in the future. I think the only way there would be change is if there's more clean athletes like my brother and I kind of speaking up on it and, being open about it. So yeah, that's the plan.
All right, so let's talk about your match coming up here. This should be very exciting. I want to remind the audience one more time. This is going to be one on Prime Video 3, headlined by John Lineker. That should be a very fun fight. This, of course, will take place the 21st of October, so the following Friday from the date this is recorded. Taking on an interesting gentleman here, Uali Kurzev, who is a Sambo world champion. Tell me what you know about him.
Man, so I know, believe I could be wrong on this, but a two-time Sambo world champion. So I know he's going to be coming in with very strong wrestling and judo background, very, maybe takedown oriented to start with. Looks like, a very physically strong person. And it's going to be interesting to see where his weakness lies. I know that's also the Sambo guys that love leg locks as well. They can have a very unorthodox leg lock entries. So that'll be interesting to see what he throws at me as well. I'm very excited. I'm not going to try and strategically go through the match where I'm like, if he has good wrestling, I'm gonna pull or anything like that. I'm just gonna, go into it like I start every match, on the feet, try to take the person down, pass and submit. That's kind of like our my brothers and I. That's been our essence of jiu-jitsu forever, and that's gonna be our plan going into this one.
As I understand it, it's 1 round, 12 minutes. I'm assuming, even though you're from jiu-jitsu and he's from Sambo, this will be no-gi, right? Like there's not going to be no jacket, no kurtka involved here, right?
Yes, sir, no-gi.
He has no shoes as well, correct?
As far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure if that's optional. Maybe he'll wear them, maybe he won't. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a no on the shoes. Yeah.
What's really interesting about this matchup, I have not obviously kept up at all with what's happened in the world of Sambo, but I have sort of watched from afar what's happening in jiu-jitsu years and years ago, again, around 2006 or 7. There just weren't a lot of leg locks at all in jiu-jitsu. In fact, it was sort of seen as like a weird kind of thing you shouldn't do. And I remember one of the first guys who came around who had a Sambo background, but jiu-jitsu as well, was Riley Bodycomb. I don't know if you remember him or not.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, it's just a massive part. So let me ask the question this way. Seeing that transition and the big change in jiu-jitsu and you being at the forefront of it, what's the next big evolution in jiu-jitsu from where it is now?
That's a great question. So I'm gonna have to bring out the psychic ball and get my prediction going. But yeah, it's a very good question. Like you said, we just had this huge kind of leg lock era kind of take over, and it seems like it's just now starting to slow down, where athletes are just, and they're still, at the highest level, athletes still getting caught with leg locks. But yeah, there's the awareness at least just now kind of being spread out throughout the community, and people are starting to see them coming a lot more earlier than before. And what's the next wave? It's a great question. I could honestly see the next wave, even though it's already been such a high percentage technique, high percentage used move. I believe the next maybe trend, which should probably just be attacking the head and just the combos of getting onto the guillotine, the darce, and the anaconda, how they all connect between each other. Because there's really, as long as you're on bottom, you can always get on the person's head while they're attacking you. And it really stops a lot of attacks, and obviously has a lot of opportunity for your own attacks. So I think just headlocks in general and mastering each headlock is going to be very important in the future if you want to, secure like an ADCC title or something like that. That and the buggy choke. I think that's something that hasn't caught on in MMA completely. You see it in jiu-jitsu a lot now, but in MMA you still don't see it a lot. And I think you need it the most in MMA because you need the body lock to hold your opponent down. And if you for 1 second you start stop body locking your opponent trying to hit them, there seems like they're already up to their feet, right? So it's difficult to keep them down, but while you're keeping them down, you can get buggy choke. So we haven't really seen that in MMA yet. And I think that's in the next couple of years going to be a huge transition, a huge, yeah.
Yeah, huge change. One of the things that I'm hoping, just this is just from hoping against hope. Tell me what you think about it. And you're already seeing a lot of evidence of it. It's obviously very hard to make a wrestling style for jiu-jitsu because the way in which wrestling was created was a lot around wrestling rules. Judo has some takedowns, but they're again around judo considerations. Mm-hmm. And you got a very kind of weird middle ground with jiu-jitsu about what it incentivizes, what it penalizes, what's a reality for you and what's not. But I have seen in my time wrestling in jiu-jitsu get significantly better. Do you feel like the next generation, they're going to find a good rule set and good specific for like jiu-jitsu wrestling takedowns? And then when that comes together, seems to me like that could create a very dynamic product.
1,000%. Every time we have a big event like this, like an ADCC or, not just ADCC, but anytime there's a big jiu-jitsu event, it's almost like homework where, we're all taking pages away from what's working, right? And, it's almost like the blueprint is posted. We had JT win the last 2 ADCCs, and it kind of seemed like that was the blueprint and how to get to the top. Very structurally sound wrestling, very hard to do anything to him. He had a great arm drag crossbody double leg, right? And you could see those specific shots that work in jiu-jitsu because you can't take those low singles like you can in wrestling, and just get down there because next thing you know, the guy's darcing you, the guy's guillotining you. And same story for the judo. A lot of the judo, obviously, we don't have grips. It's not going to work the same. It's going to be very difficult, So it is difficult to find that middle ground. And I think every time we have a big event and watching the athletes compete in it, it's almost like our blueprint of how, the wrestling in jiu-jitsu should work because there's, there are little differences that we have to kind of adjust and make.
Speaking of which, this match you have against Kurzev, which will be in the one cage, I believe it was your match, if I'm not mistaken, against Shinya Aoki, where you were able to push off the fence to help facilitate, I think, further taking the back and then move the match forward. First question was that spontaneous, or did you know that was something you were going to do? And I guess the second part would be a broader question. In your experience, to what extent does the cage transform the match?
Great question. So in the moment, I had zero intention of doing it. I just was clinched up with him. I looked to my right and I just seen the post there. I reckon if it was the cage, I wouldn't have done it because I was just scared to get my toes stuck in there. We've seen those horror stories of John Jones' toe just in half. Mm-hmm. Definitely didn't want that happening. So when I was clinched up with him, I looked to my right. I just seen the post. I was like, perfect. I'm just gonna send it. And I just stepped off and just flew as hard as I could off the other direction. Ended up getting the back off it, which is dope. But I think the cage, it definitely changes it a ton. I think even in the match with Ty and Gary, my brother, and the following match, you kind of seen it play into effect where Ty was setting up a darce and Gary couldn't really roll back because the cage was there, so he kind of rolled into the darce, right? So it definitely makes differences in matches. I think it'll be definitely interesting in my upcoming match here with Uali. As we're, I feel like both, pretty strong wrestlers, good stand-up, pretty strong judo. The cage is definitely going to be played in effect, so we'll see who can, push who against who up the cage and use it better.
Okay, so last for me would be this. Now, I don't want to put any pressure on you. This is not what this question is, but I am genuinely curious, right? You and your brother are jiu-jitsu phenoms. You had the win so far of your very young but highly accomplished life already at ADCC. We'll see what happens next week at 1. Do you have any intentions of giving MMA an eyeball? Are you looking at it a little bit? Or are you just thinking, listen, I got some work to do in jiu-jitsu and I'll cross that bridge down the line when we get there?
Right. No, I'm fully have full intentions in going to MMA for sure. My goal is early next year is to start getting my feet wet, maybe hopefully have my debut early next year. Before this last ADCC, I was working my hands a lot more, training a bit more MMA, and then that last 30 days of the camp, I kind of just stayed focused on jiu-jitsu, of course, for that big tournament. But my goal was to get right back to it after ADCC, but we have this last one match jiu-jitsu, so I'm gonna nail out this last week of training jiu-jitsu. Try to do my best to put out Ueli, and pretty much right after that, get back to the hands and keep working my boxing, Muay Thai, everything like that.
Well, I got to tell you, young man, you are on your way. This will be at 1 on Prime Video 3, of course, headlined by John Lineker in a 145-pound contest against Fabricio de Andrade. But this gentleman, Kade Ruotolo, taking on Uali Kurzev, a 12-minute, one-round, 170-pound bout, which, by the way, you will be then crowned the champion of this weight class with a belt. That's a fun little trophy if you get the win. So a lot going on. I wish you nothing but the best of luck. I appreciate your time, and I cannot wait to see you compete.
Thank you so much, boss. I appreciate it. Nice to meet you, Luke.